It is the evening of July 13th, 2023. Fifth Avenue, Midtown Manhattan. Rush hour. Thousands of people walking. Nobody paying attention to the large man in the business suit heading south after a long day at the office. His name is Rex Heuermann. He is 59 years old. He runs his own architecture firm 5 blocks from here. He has a home in the suburbs, a wife, 2 children. He has lived this same routine, office, commute, home, for 3 decades. Tonight, he will never make it home. Plainclothes officers close in from multiple directions. A security camera captures the moment. Within seconds, one of the most prolific serial killers in the history of New York State is in handcuffs on a Manhattan sidewalk. Investigators had been watching him for months. And what they found was this. A man who designed buildings for a living had spent 17 years designing something else entirely. A double life so precisely constructed, so carefully hidden, that it fooled his family, his colleagues, his neighbors, and 3 separate police departments. 8 women are dead. Their bodies were dumped along a remote stretch of Long Island coastline, wrapped in burlap and left for years in the dark. Here is the question that matters. How does a man kill 8 people across nearly 2 decades while living as a family man in a quiet suburb, 45 miles from New York City? And more importantly, who failed to stop him? To understand how Rex Heuermann remained invisible for so long, we need to go back, all the way back to 1993. That year, the body of Sandra Castilla, 28 years old, a native of Trinidad and Tobago, was found by hunters in North Sea, Long Island. Investigators could not identify a killer. The case went cold. 10 years pass. In July 2003, a dog walker in Manorville, Long Island, discovered the partial remains of a young woman. Her head and her hands had been removed, deliberately, to prevent identification. She was eventually identified as Jessica Taylor, 20 years old. Her skull and hands would not be found until March 2011, miles away near Gilgo Beach. The same method, the same area, no connection made. Then, in the early morning hours of May 1st, 2010, a 23-year-old woman named Shannon Gilbert called 911 from a house in Oak Beach, Long Island. She was terrified. She said someone was chasing her. The call lasted 23 minutes. She ran into the darkness and disappeared. Her mother reported her missing. Police, according to reports at the time, were slow to respond. Shannon was a sex worker, and her family felt authorities were not taking her disappearance seriously. But they searched, and what they found along Ocean Parkway in December 2010 would shock the country. In the scrubland beside a beach highway, within a single quarter-mile stretch, investigators found 4 sets of human remains. All women, all young, all sex workers who had advertised on Craigslist. All wrapped in burlap, all dumped like debris. Melissa Barthelemy, Maureen Brainerd Barnes, Megan Waterman, Amber Lynn Costello. 4 women, 1 mile of highway, 1 killer, and at that point, 0 suspects. The investigation that followed in 2010 and 2011 uncovered more bodies. By the spring of 2011, remains had been found up and down Ocean Parkway. Valerie Mack, Karen Vergata, known for years only as Fire Island Jane Doe. More unidentified remains, a toddler. The scale was staggering. And then, nothing. The investigation stalled, cold, silent, for more than a decade. Rex Heuermann went back to work. He took the Long Island Railroad. He designed renovation projects in Manhattan. He attended meetings. He answered emails. He came home to his family in Massapequa Park, a neighborhood directly across the bay from where he had dumped his victims. According to court documents filed after his arrest, during this period, Heuermann was conducting thousands of internet searches. He searched for information on the active Gilgo Beach investigation. He searched, under an alias, for articles about the FBI task force looking for the killer. He searched, why hasn't the Long Island serial killer been caught? He was monitoring his own case, watching from the inside of a normal life. His victims had been sex workers who advertised online. He allegedly used burner phones, prepaid, untraceable, to contact them, arrange meetings, and then vanish. Those burner phones were methodically activated only when his wife and children were out of town. Cell tower records would later show the burner phones and his personal phone traveling together to the same locations at the same times. This was not impulsive. This was not disorganized. This was architecture. 3 layers of concealment. A public life of professional respectability. A private life of burner phones and aliases. And between those 2 worlds, 8 women who trusted a stranger and never came home. In February 2022, Suffolk County Police Commissioner Rodney Harrison convened a new multi-agency task force, bringing together the Suffolk County Police Department, the Suffolk County Sheriff's Office, the New York State Police, and the FBI. It was the first time all 4 agencies had worked together on this case. Within a month, investigators had a person of interest, Rex Heuermann. The task force began surveillance, quietly, carefully. They collected hairs from bottles Heuermann had placed in his own bin on the curb outside his home. They matched female hairs found on the victims' bodies to Heuermann's wife and daughter. Prosecutors believe those hairs transferred to the victims while they were inside the Heuermann family home. But they needed his DNA, directly. So they followed him to Manhattan. They watched him eat lunch near his office on 5th Avenue. They watched him throw away a box. The remnants of a pizza. Officers moved in immediately, grabbed the box from the sidewalk bin, sent it to the crime lab. The result? Mitochondrial DNA from the discarded pizza crust matched a male hair found on the burlap used to restrain Megan Waterman. Investigators said the result excluded more than 99% of the population. A pizza crust. That was the break. On the evening of July 13, 2023, with that DNA in hand and 13 years of evidence assembled, they arrested Rex Heuermann on 5th Avenue. He was in tears. His first words, according to his lawyer, were, "I didn't do this." He would maintain that position for nearly 3 years. Here is what the headline coverage has largely skipped past. Heuermann's first alleged murder was in 1993, 30 years before his arrest. The bodies found along Ocean Parkway in 2010 suggested a killer with years of practice. A killer who had already refined a method, who had already learned how to dispose of remains, cover tracks, avoid detection. That experience did not come from nowhere. And here is the systemic failure that runs beneath this entire story. When Shannon Gilbert disappeared in 2010, her mother pushed police to search for her. She felt, according to public reports at the time, that authorities were not treating the case with urgency because her daughter was a sex worker. That reluctance to fully engage, that gap between the urgency applied to certain missing persons reports and the urgency applied to others, is why the bodies along Ocean Parkway went undiscovered for so long. Every one of Heuermann's confirmed victims was a woman working in the sex trade. Every one advertised online, specifically on Craigslist, which made them accessible, isolated, and, prosecutors allege, specifically targeted by Heuermann for that reason. This is the layer beneath the layer. The killer chose victims he believed the system would not prioritize. And for over a decade, the system proved him right. The Gilgo Beach Task Force was not created until 2022, 12 years after the bodies were first found. 12 years during which Rex Heuermann walked free, drew up building plans, searched his own case online, and, according to the final guilty plea on April 8, 2026, continued to take victims as recently as 2010. Who failed? Not one officer, not one agency. a structural blind spot embedded in how missing persons cases involving sex workers were treated. That is the hidden story. On April 8, 2026, Rex Heuermann stood in Suffolk County Court in Riverhead, New York. He pleaded guilty. 3 counts of first-degree murder, 4 counts of second-degree murder, and he acknowledged responsibility for an 8th victim, Karen Vergata, the woman known for decades only as Fire Island Jane Doe. Relatives of the victims were present. According to multiple news reports, they were heard gasping as Heuermann replied, one by one, to the judge's question of how he killed each woman. His answer, each time, strangulation. His ex-wife, Asa Ellerup, and their daughter attended quietly. Ellerup said afterward, her thoughts and prayers were with the victims and their families. Heuermann's sentencing is scheduled for June 17, 2026. He faces life in prison without the possibility of parole. Multiple life sentences. He will not leave prison. But the broader stakes remain unresolved. There are still unidentified remains found along Ocean Parkway that have not been connected to any suspect. Investigators have confirmed that Heuermann is not believed to be responsible for all of the deaths found in that area. At least one set of remains, an unidentified Asian male, has still never been identified. The Gilgo Beach corridor may have attracted more than one predator. That investigation is not over. And across the United States and the United Kingdom, law enforcement agencies are now re-examining how cold cases involving missing sex workers were handled, and whether systemic blind spots allowed killers to operate undetected for years. This case has forced that conversation. That is not nothing. So here is the verdict. Rex Heuermann was not a monster from the shadows. He was a professional man, a taxpayer, a neighbor, a father. He walked the same streets as everyone else for 30 years. He held a business card. He attended construction meetings. And he used every advantage of that ordinary, respectable life. The predictable schedule, the suburban home, the family alibi to conceal what he was doing. Layer 1, a respected Manhattan architect, visible to the world. Layer 2, a calculated predator using burner phones, timing, and digital aliases to operate unseen. Layer 3, the real beneficiary of his freedom for 30 years, and it was not luck. It was a system that looked away from the women he targeted. The winners here are limited. The task force that broke the case, the DNA technology that cracked it open, and 8 women. Sandra Castilla, Valerie Mack, Karen Vergata, Jessica Taylor, Melissa Barthélemy, Maureen Brainerd Barnes, Megan Waterman, and Amber Lynn Costello, who finally have a name attached to what was done to them. The losers, the years their families spent without answers, the decade the investigation sat cold, and every structural assumption that made Heuermann's freedom possible. He said, "I didn't do this." Then, on April 8, 2026, 30 years after his first murder, he stood in open court and admitted that he did. This was not an accident. The time it took to catch him was not a coincidence. Let us know in the comments what you think. Was justice served, or did the system fail the victims long before Rex Heuermann was ever arrested? And in the meantime, thank you very much.